Good morning, Walt. This is Steve Rao. I don't know why there's a hold on. There's a echo in the back, so I apologize. Um, well, welcome to World Edition, and we meet you from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina. Good morning, world. This is Councilmember Steve Rao, the host of World Edition on Roku TV. Apologize for the technical difficulty. We greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the 8th largest state in the Union. And on this show, we welcome you from wherever you are in the world or country to talk about global affairs, an ever-changing world, turbulence in politics, the economy. And the elephant in the room today is Silicon Valley Bank, as the United States is dealing with a massive fallout of a major bank, second largest bank in the U.S. It's been taken over by the government, the second largest bank failure in the U.S. All we know about SVB is that it served tech companies, startups, venture capitalists, and actually had a big office in North Carolina. And the government now is trying to find a buyer. So we're going to talk about this. What prompted this to happen? And will it spiral off a series of other bank failures like what you saw in 2008? Today, we'll also be talking about Ukraine. Over 1,100 Russian fighters were killed in Bakhmut this past week. As Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said yesterday, Russia said it killed more than 220 Ukrainian troops in the past day. Russian soldiers have pushed Ukrainian forces to Bakhmut's western edge, cutting off all but one road from the city. President Biden is expected to approve a controversial oil deal today, the ConocoPhillips Willow drilling project, which basically is on federal land in Alaska's North Slope. To offset the environmental concerns, he plans to make the Arctic Ocean off limits to U.S. oil and gas leasing. But this will affect our ability to open up the pipelines in our country as we're looking for an energy independent strategy. Flooding in California, and the final take of the day is the Oscars. I watched some of it. I never stay up that late. I'm going to go back and watch it, but it was a big night for Asian actors and actresses, and a really, really great opportunity for us to talk about, the movies. And there was a couple of really big wins. And I think, Mark, I don't know what the movie was. Thank you for being that won all the Oscars with Jamie Lee Curtis. What's the name? Everything and All? Or
I'm trying to remember the name of that myself, but I'll try to get that and get information about it and everything. But yeah, I'm trying to remember that title myself.
Yes. Well, thank you for the show. Sorry for the echo in the beginning. A lot to talk about. I guess we'll start off with Silicon Valley Bank. I don't really know what set off this bank failure, but hopefully we can figure it out. But I do know Silicon Valley Bank. They have hopefully you and I can bring in some experts to talk about the fallout and what prompted it to happen. But any thoughts there?
No, like I said, I'm wondering if we're going to see more banks like this that'll be collapsing. We do know that historically that is when it's happened with recessions and depressions and things of that nature. So don't have any direct connection to that bank, but I am curious to see whether we see other bank fallouts. We know we've seen some insurance businesses and some others that have had fallout, but it'll be interesting to follow. And I'm sure that Sasha Starr may have some thoughts around that, as he is definitely involved in the investment space and all in that kind of way. But that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we'll bring in some economists, and we'll try to see what we're going to do here. But it's just crazy times out there, and hopefully we can bring in some experts to talk about it. We've got some other guests joining us, but the other issue before we get to the Oscars was there were no slaps, no major things like that. Dan Worthington said interest rates kill the bank. Are we bringing in Dan Worthington? Is he here? The guest? Dan? Hello?
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah.
Hey, we keep losing.
No, so the story with the bank was
they
were heavily invested in treasuries.
Yeah.
And interest rates increased. So as a result, the value of the treasuries dropped. And liquidate. Right. So when they had to liquidate it, and they didn't have sufficient liquidation. They couldn't find any buyers, and so they sunk. That's going to happen to it. See, a lot of the big banks, especially those investment banks, are required to invest in treasuries because it's the government, it's Federal Reserve, right? And the Fed has created its own problem. We're likely to see many more bank failures because of these aggressive interest rate increases that have been done so quickly. So the strategy to decrease inflation has had the unintended consequence of defaulting some banks. The other problem with that particular bank is its woke policies. They were so busy partying and screwing around. Nobody really had the eye on the ball, and everybody. I mean, they just paid out their bonuses prior to defaulting. I mean, seriously, they can't even do it with a straight face.
Oh yeah, all I know about them is they had an office in Boston. One of my friends, I'm going to try to bring him on as a guest, was a guy named Suresh Shanmugam, who I grew up in West Virginia, that was a venture capitalist who ended up running their Indian operation, but they had a presence in North Carolina, and they were always involved with startups, being there to provide the bridge loan and financing, even if a company got venture financing. So it's going to be interesting what kind of a hit this will bring to the economy.
It'll be a big hit.
Do you think other banks will follow? We're getting, do you think it was just one bad situation that we just have to deal with?
I think other banks will follow if they're over leveraged.
Yeah.
This bank was clearly over leveraged.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're waiting. I don't know what happened to Mark Lee. I'm waiting for him to come back. He's having some technical issues, so we'll keep going here. I'm here for about 30 minutes today. Real quickly, there's been some talk about the Conoco pipeline near Alaska, and the president's administration is moving forward with it, but they're now trying to tailor it to not be able to open up the gas lines in the Arctic area. Do you think this factors in? How important do you think it is for us to open up more of our own oil and gas lines, especially with everything going on in Ukraine and all this Western European dependence on?
All right, so it's clearly important, and the problem is the Biden administration has to pander to the environmentalists, right? And so it announces it's going to do this because it makes sense. It's what America needs. And then he has to backpedal because he has to make the environmentalists happy because he's a two-faced liar. And so as a result, he wants to have the economic win to show that he's pushing oil and gas production because that's what America needs. And on the other hand, he has to talk out of the other side of his mouth so that the environmentalists are happy, right? So he has to kind of do both of those things, which makes no damn sense. I mean, at all. Screw the environmentalists at this point. I mean, we have a crisis. We have an energy crisis because of what's going on in Ukraine and that kind of thing. Sometimes you have to make decisions that are tough, and you got to have the fortitude to follow through with them. And Biden's not that kind of person.
Right. I mean, it's going to be. It did seem like progress, and all of a sudden he backed on. Before we come back to that issue, Sasha, give us and then we have Lee with us. Give us a quick update on what's happened in Bakhmut in Ukraine.
Well, what's happened there is that the remaining Russian forces there, and remaining by no means that they're about to be wiped out anytime soon. Well, we'll see about that. But they are doing everything possible and impossible to continue their attack, because this is basically continuation of their great winter attack. And essentially, that's probably one of very few places when they keep attacking, sustaining heavy losses, incredible losses. I'm watching one publication, Ukrainian Pravda. You can translate it as the truth of Ukraine. And that resource, it shows every day how many Russians were killed, how many tanks they lost, the fighter jet planes, and so on and on and on. So the number, usually it would be in the range of few hundred, like 600-700. Now it's rarely a day when it will be less than 1,000. It's 1,200, 1,100. So it keeps, you see, they're going into waves. Sometimes they are doing 150 and more attacks a day. So they send a first wave, it's all being destroyed, killed. Second wave in almost like half an hour, then another wave, and they keep losing most of these people. Well, unless they have incredible supply of this mobilized people,
Sasha?
they intend to kill. I just don't see any reason. Yes, Lee.
Yeah, I don't doubt anything that you're saying, but why don't some of the Russians just abandon and give up and say we surrender? I mean, how would they be treated by the Ukrainians? Would they save their lives, or would they just be butchered anyways?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, there are a lot of deserters as we speak. The only thing what is not happening, they don't desert in groups, because that requires certain coordination and agreement, and they are scared that whatever they are going to talk to, they are going to their superiors and tell them what they're planning to do, and these people will be punished severely, probably killed. So, but that is happening as we speak all the time. And a lot of people are deserting because they don't have any weapons to fight with. Sometimes the soldiers, when they have no weapons, they're becoming just meat to be killed. So
Targets.
they are running the targets. So they're running away, and they don't care whether they will be arrested, convicted, put in jail, or whatever. They just can't.
Are the Ukrainians treating them humanely, or are not? They're just killing them anyways.
No, there are no cases that Ukrainians would kill them in spite of the fact what Russians are doing. And this video is incredible when they killed this. I saw it actually a few times. It's incredible. This is exactly what Russians are. You see, the territory, I wouldn't call it even a country, it's a territory that never had a renaissance, never had any humanity. You see, the problem is that the Russians, they really look like Europeans. It's very difficult to draw the line. Okay, here is a German or Swede, and here is a Russian. It's not there. Unless we are talking about Russians from Far East and Siberia parts and so on, but they're not really Russians. Okay, but that's beyond the point. So the problem is that their way of conducting the war is the same as it was 1,000 years ago, 800 years ago. Then, of course, they've learned a lot from the Mongols during the 250 years of occupation. So they are using very brutal treatment of their own population, the army of people that they're fighting with. And Ukrainians are saying, no, we are civilized people. We are part of European culture. We will not do that what the Russians are doing to our people. That's where Ukraine stands, if I answer your question.
You did. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, we're going to continue to monitor the situation. Sasha, at this point, what do you think about the war? Are we just going to see this back and forth continuing? Are things, I have to go back and listen to the Zelensky town hall, but what are he doesn't seem to us. Where are we right now?
See, the problem with this war is that this is for Putin is essentially a life and death situation for him personally and for his regime, and therefore for Russia, although it's less obvious. Now, for Ukrainian, it's existential war. They will all die, but they will not allow Russians to rule whoever will be alive. From the West, unfortunately, this is a nonsense that they have to deal with somehow. And what Putin is really playing for, it's a long war as long as possible, because sooner or later the West will get tired of it. They will just get tired and say, oh, hell with this Russia and Ukraine, and just do whatever you want, and so on. This is Putin's major card. Also, he is quite skillful to create a coalition of Russia, North Korea, China, Iran. So it's a evil sort of combination of all evil that there is in the world at this time. So, but he was able to unite, and with the countries like India, and now it's evident that former Soviet republics, especially Kazakhstan, they are also supplying Russia with everything necessary imports from the West. How it became evident, I was reading a very interesting study, that Kazakhstan in, say, 2021, they would buy, say, worth of $12,000 worth of semiconductors. But in 2022, they would buy $12.5 million worth of semiconductors. And there is no evidence that in Kazakhstan they built new factories or new businesses that would require a lot of semiconductors. None of that. So obviously that is going to Russia, and this is the way how Russia fills the gap, and all the sanctions, therefore, are much less effective than they could have been. However, saying all that, everything will be decided on the battlefield anyway, and that's where everything will happen. And a lot of things are depending on deliveries of Western equipment. And apparently I was reading interesting statistics of all the equipment which was delivered to Ukraine. 75% is coming from Germany, in spite of the fact that the Germans were very reluctant, and they were saying that, no, we are not going to supply Leopards and this and that. But 75% of all military equipment is coming from Germany. I'm not saying it's a German-produced equipment, because a US keeps a lot of equipment in Germany, as we know. So maybe some of it was US equipment, but a lot of German equipments are coming to Ukraine its way.
One last question, and
it will be long.
One last question, and then we're going to go to some other issues. But and for those of you listening, Sasha has his own show on this. I'm hoping to come back there soon as a guest, but as an analyst. But Sasha, at the end of the day, one concern I have is that this is kind of a zero-sum game for both countries. I mean, Russia is going to be devastated now for many, many years to come. Maybe their economy not so much as we thought, but their military has been weakened. Ukraine, even if they win the war, it's been completely destroyed. They're going to have to rebuild. So, I mean, does there come a point where some kind of a settlement makes sense, in terms of striking a deal with Crimea, for exchange for NATO membership? Do you think that's in the back of Zelensky's mind, or is it just he's going to keep going? Because it's like scorched earth at this point.
Yes, it's a very, very good question, Steve. And you see, there is a school of thought that says that peace is possible when continuation of war is becoming more expensive than peace. And that point has not been reached. Because and there are two major problems. Number one, that even Ukraine would cede some territories to Russia. There is no way to guarantee that Russia in 6-9 months will start new attack and would want even more territories. That would be somehow guaranteed unless Ukraine would become a member of NATO. That would stop Russians. But that is I would say it's in discussions, but nothing more than that. So, and there is a procedure that could be quite long. Sometimes it takes years. So even if it would be a speedy process, it still would take several months. So who is going to guarantee that Russians will regroup, will bring more mobilized people, more the weapons and so on, and will start new attack. And now Ukraine will be disabled. It will be in a worse shape than it was a year ago because they already lost some territory. Okay, so they are more vulnerable to Russian attack if they will regroup or so on. So the purpose actually is what they still hold Bakhmut, which is not really strategic place, but they hold on to it, not to allow Russians to continue their attack. So they got stuck in Bakhmut. They were talking a lot about that they are going to drop bombs on London and Paris and Berlin and so on and on and on. Yet they cannot take Bakhmut for several months now. So this raises serious doubts about effectiveness of so-called Second World Army. It's pathetic, really. That's what it is.
So, quick topic shift. Did any of you watch the Oscars last night?
I watch on and on. I don't like these programs very much. I would rather watch tennis. But
Waste of time.
to me, it's a waste of time. Exactly.
I haven't seen. Yeah, I'm
My
gonna go
wife
see.
watched, so I was sometimes.
Well, I said that movie was pretty good, though. I can't even remember the name of it. I never even heard it in the theater. So it just. Well, Jimmy Kimmel was a good host. I like him. He's pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw some of it. Yeah, it's not bad.
Lee, you've been awfully quiet this morning. What insights do you have, Sue? You're on mute.
Lee, I can't hear you.
You can't read lips? America left a lot of weapons in Afghanistan. We're giving a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Is there a point that we're weakening our own armies, our own military strength?
Yes, there is a point, because I know that Canada is about to invade and take over 3 northern states from U.S. And
well, you can have
Washington.
and
You can take
Oregon.
Washington, okay? We'll give you that.
and Mexico, you have one in Mexico too.
It's also getting hard to
A
recruit.
lot of ammunition and
You can have New Hampshire.
It's getting hard. It's getting hard to recruit for the military as well.
That's another point, Steve, that can't be understated, overstated.
Yeah. That's a scenario how the Republicans will win election. If Canada will take all the northern states like New Hampshire, Maine, and a couple of others, that will be slide win for Republicans.
You can have parts of New York.
New York City.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the worthless. You guys can have the worthless parts of the United States where the Democratic strongholds. That'd be fine.
Dan, you spoke before about why Silicon Bank failed and about other banks. I'm not disagreeing with what you were saying in terms of what they did and what's going on, but that a lot of that applies to other banks also. I'm hearing that Silicon Bank's problem was, as rates are rising, they never hedged for it. They're getting caught with their pants down. The other banks knew what they were doing. They did their homework.
Yeah, it's because the value of stuff is interest sensitive, right? So as interest rates go up,
that's all banks.
Paper, yeah, true.
But
if you have a lot of paper and it's carrying a lower interest rate, it gets devalued. And because there are the FDIC rules and federal banking rules, you've got to have a certain amount of reserves in order to be able to stay open. And so they didn't.
But then I'm surprised that you missed, in your very good estimation, what's really happened. You missed one very important thing, that the management of the bank was the stupidest one in 200 years.
I already mentioned that.
Incredibly
woke
incompetent.
Idiots. Yeah.
They're
woke idiots, partiers. I mean, they're so busy politicking for the left that they didn't have time to manage the bank.
Well, they all will be fired, of course.
Is it a left-leaning bank? I don't know. I mean, most bankers are conservative.
It's a Silicon Valley bank, Steve. And so what they did is they invested in 2 of the worst types of investments you could get into. Startups.
Which were?
Startups.
Which are, Nick? Startups?
Yeah. Okay. And so the thing is, the failure rate on these are
very high.
Unbelievable. They're like 90% in 5 years. And they did healthcare startups, which might be good, but their failure rate's bad too. So what happened is they had some serious problems. By the way, another bank did go under, Signature Bank. Got taken over by the FDIC also. I don't think we're going to see the end of this. It's going to be a while. There'll be a ripple. And when they said your you have access to the money. See, the devil's in the details. We don't know all the details.
Right.
The FDIC protects 250,000.
That's
Above
it.
that, you may not have access to it. And so this could create a ripple effect with all these startups that have what they call countervailing balances. In other words, they borrow money from the bank and then they put the money into the bank. Okay. And now all of a sudden, let's say you borrowed $1 million. All right. And the bank's requirement is that you have banking relationships with us. So you put the $1 million with Silicon Valley Bank. Then Silicon Valley Bank goes under. You have access to 250,000. What happens to the other 750? Yet to be determined. But
Well, I've
I
heard
went down this rabbit hole back in 1993 with an insurance company called Mutual Benefit Life. Okay. And what they did is they did what they call rehabilitation. And so most of the policies holders were solvent, but they pulled some stunts that you just wouldn't believe. It took years for the courts to come up with the inside dirt on exactly what happened with the failure of Mutual Benefit Life Insurance Company back in 1993. Now we're looking at Silicon Valley Bank, established in 1983. Haven't been around that long, you know? What? Not even.
I've heard in the morning Biden who said that effectively no one will lose any money, the depositors.
I know what he said, but
Yeah,
he
that's-
always lies.
But
Now,
He always
this
lies,
is,
though.
okay, that's probably not fair because if you're insured up to 250, okay, and let's see, you deposited say 500K, so that's your ignorance. You should have put only 250 to that bank and maybe another 250 to another bank. Okay, that's all fine, except that the problem is that there are a lot of businesses who have payrolls and pay salaries, and they have money deposited with the bank. And if they will be insured only up to 250, but they have for payroll and other purposes, say $2 million, and they all would be vanished, then they will not be able to pay salaries. So it will be really a collapse of not just the bank, but many other businesses, individuals, or so on. So that I agree that there is a wisdom to avoid this horrible scenario. However, the shareholders of the bank, they will be left with nothing.
yeah, they're toast.
Likely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, well, let's go. Well, anyway, we're going to continue to monitor this. Hopefully, Mark, we can bring in some economists and financial experts to talk about this. It doesn't look like anyone wants to talk about the Oscars. So let's get into the oil drilling situation. What other parts of the country are we going to be able to drill oil? And if, like Dan Worthington said, we had this Conoco pipeline near Alaska, and they said we're going to do it, but then we're going to hold back and not do as much near the Arctic. Are there any other areas in the country that we could be looking at in terms of more drilling?
Sure.
Oil shale, but that's dirty oil. I mean,
Texas.
there's Texas, but that's also a bit of a problem.
Nick, why is anything off
The
limits?
Gulf.
Why is it off limits?
Right.
It's because the thing is you basically, at least this is the way I understand. I'm not an SME on oil and gas. The way I understand it is that you contaminate water permanently when you do this fracking deal. But again, that's just my rudimentary understanding. I think another important topic we need to look at, because obviously no one here is excited about the Oscars, is the federal government budget, which came out. And we're going to be discussing that later on with David Walker. Very interesting budget. I don't know. Has anybody read it? It came out a couple days
Yeah.
ago.
Is it been passed or just proposed?
It's proposed.
No, it's proposed. It hasn't
By the administration.
The
Okay.
Biden
Biden.
budget.
by the Biden administration. Okay. To give you
Yeah,
an idea of the
it's a
efficiency of
POS.
this-
It's
What?
a POS. POS.
It hasn't
I mean,
passed. No.
It's more of the same stuff. It really is. I mean, it's just more woke crap. He's positioning himself, and in fact, many of the things that he's including were stuff that he couldn't get through with the Democratic majority. So it's just like, well, I'm gonna up the ante. See, this is what Biden and the Democrats do. They just double down on everything. If it's a lie, they double down. If it's a farce, they double down. This budget is a farce. It's never going to be adopted. So instead of putting something out that's going to be viable and in good faith, that he can negotiate with the Republicans, he does this crap, right? And including all the tax increases that were also proposed when the Democrats had a majority, and those things were dismissed then because they were not viable. So suddenly, how does this become viable when he doesn't have the votes? It's unrealistic. It was irresponsible, but it just goes to show you what Biden and the Democrats are like. Nick, I don't understand why you even associate with these idiots.
Well, it's because I have the other choice, which is the crazy Republicans, and everything you said about the Democrats could be said about the Republicans because
you're right about that.
But,
I have to concede.
But here's the problem I have with the budget. I have a lot of problems with it.
I'm sorry, Nick, I'll interrupt you just a second for our viewing public. And this is what the budget that's proposed by the administration. Congress takes it whole, or can they piecemeal it? Is it take it or leave it, or they can chop it up?
No, they
has
can
no
chop
effect.
it up. They can repropose
It has no
The
effect.
problem that I have with it more than anything, Lee, is the enormity of this budget. And the other problem I have, and I don't know about you, Dan, you got a lot of education. So did I. Did you ever take a class in congressional budgets? Or was it one ever offered? No. In other words, this goes back to Bill Denko and I think also David Walker saying we should have a civics class. We should have a class in budget, the U.S. budget. You know why? How big this budget is? It's the third largest country in the world. Think about it. If you look at our budget is $6.7 trillion. I'm sorry, Sasha. It's bigger than your whole country of Canada and Ukraine combined, and you can throw in Great Britain. You have to imagine everybody in Canada and everybody in Ukraine working for the federal government. That's how big it is. People don't know how large this turkey is. Not only is this turkey incredibly fat, okay, it's running a deficit. Now, it would have been impressed if Biden balanced it. The last one who did it was Bill Clinton. Before that, it was Richard Nixon. Today, it's like their God-given right to just, and then Dan, they don't lie. They just do material misrepresentation of fact. They go, in his statement, he goes, no more taxes by people under 400,000. Absolutely not true. And I'll tell you why. Number one, inflation. That's a hidden tax. When you spend
we've had the biggest tax increase in our history.
Problem number two, when your salary goes up because of inflation, you're going to pay more as your bracket goes into, as your income goes into higher tax brackets. Yeah. So it is, when I read through the whole thing, I said this would never pass a securities review because a reviewer would say this is material misrepresentation of facts. Yet, if you look on the White House website, it's a statement of fact. It's not a fact. Okay, and they omit.
That's Biden's whole career, though.
I actually have
like Biden's whole career. It represents his whole false narrative of his entire life, his body of work. Everything has been a lie. Everything.
Yeah, well, when I was reading through that, Dan, I was appalled, and also how if you read through all the garbage that comes before, it's a sales job. I mean, an SEC prospectus could never put in what he put in to his White House proposal. It was a complete sales
Nick,
job. In other words,
but from a bargaining standpoint, if he doesn't ask, he's not going to get. Why not start out high?
Why not start out high? Because the thing is, again, it's politics.
It's irresponsible.
If he did this,
I'm not saying it's not, Nick. Dan, I agree with you. It is irresponsible.
Well, in any budget, there's always
from a bargaining standpoint. Ask for the whole,
Where I would have respect for this man if he actually presented a balanced budget, and he can do it. Remember, we're not talking billions. We're talking $6.7 trillion, and he can't balance that checkbook. I have no respect for him anymore. Who's the other candidates out there? Trump. Oh, I have no respect for him too. So who are going to vote for him?
But the problem is there's so many. I mean, in any budget,
even myself,
as a local government, it's a lot.
I'd vote for you. By the way, I would, because the thing is you can't be worse.
But in city governments, the funny thing.
Thank you. How many friends you got?
I look at what we have about 1.8 million viewers. We're now 1.9 million our annual.
I look at the way we do city budgets. I look at the way we do local government budgets. Our budget's very small in Morrisville. I think it's 35 million. Carries is billions of dollars.
But I bet it's balanced, Steve.
Yeah, but we have rules. So one rule that we have, which is very interesting for those of you listening around the
You
world.
can play tricks also, though. They have a lot of off-balance sheet items.
No, in North Carolina, though, what is there's something called a fund balance. So that's the savings accounts that you have, and that you can basically, the law allows you to go no lower than 25% of that level. So when it gets to the 25% level, then you have to start worrying about, okay, is the fund balance too low? But the whole idea is that you have your rates of revenue that you could raise with, property tax, and then other revenue mechanisms, fees, permits, and so you can never.
In other words, screw the taxpayer, right?
No, but you have to be a balanced budget, so you don't screw the taxpayer. We've gone in Morrisville, we've only increased taxes once in 20 years, and that was when there was a revenue. They did a reevaluation of the houses, and so the tax rate actually went back. But then because we passed bonds, we moved the tax rate up. But those were voter approved bonds. But you don't want to get loose and increase the tax every year. But the bottom line is you don't spend beyond your means.
Yeah, by the way, that's a good concept. All right, every state, local government, even North Carolina, actually has a surplus. Our crazy HOA, we have a surplus, but the federal government is run deficits. And one problem is, I knew they're throwing a lot more money into the Department of Education, but it doesn't matter. They're teaching the wrong things. You're wasting your money. They should have a mandatory class on budgeting and start with the U.S. government budget. It represents
do away with the Department of Education and let the states handle
it. Dan, as you know, this is 25%, 21 to 25% of all your money. And we don't have a class on that. The other thing is they should have hearings on the budget. I'm sure they will anyway. But the thing is, they need to have the serious, like January 6th hearings on this budget. Go through it. It's huge. Like I said, this is bigger than like France and Spain and Italy combined, or Great Britain and France combined. You're talking
the
about
Education Department is a good example of the fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government.
Department, I agree. Department of Education.
Because even the state offices of education are a fraud, right? Because in many states, more than half the money ends up going to these state offices of education. The federal government, why do we even have a federal government Department of Education?
I think Jimmy Carter.
They take money in from the people all around the country and distribute it back out based on whatever their woke agenda is. Do away with it. Let the money stay with the states. Let them do what they need to do with it. And forget about.
This is where you and I agree. It should be a state function, and you may consider doing away or minimizing the Department of Education. But the other problem I have with education, it doesn't matter the money, what you're teaching. They do not teach the federal government budget in our education system.
It's all the mandates that are screwing up our schools. The federal mandates screw up our schools, increase the cost of administering the schools with all the stupid rules. And, it just makes it impossible to be an educator anymore unless you happen to be a left-wing wingnut. And that's
and the other thing, if you look at all their programs, the people that benefit from the programs are the people that are structure themselves to basically suck off the government from years and years ago. And so if you're a middle class,
and it's the unions, right?
If you're rich middle class, you're not benefiting from this. You're going to be hurt by this. It may benefit certain amounts of the poor, the extreme poor in the United States, but that's about it. And everybody else is going to suffer through inflation and higher taxes because your salary is going to go up. You're going to pay more in taxes as your real estate prices go up because of inflation. And the other thing is inflation across the boards. So it's
dumbing down. It's dumbing down the
horrible to the American public.
All right.
And the thing is, he needs to balance this bloody budget. If he can't balance it, I would fire him immediately, appoint someone else who can actually do it, because he can't do it.
Yeah. So, Nick, tell me, when we went to school, right?
Yeah.
You studied, you took the test, and that was it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you're stuck with a score. I mean, there were no do-overs. right?
Right. That's true.
Now it's do-overs, do-overs, do-overs for everything. How does that freaking make any sense? It's like you don't, okay, I don't have to do my best on this one because I get a chance to do it over. You know, so it's like teaching the kids not to be prepared and take their studies as
Dan?
seriously as they should.
Dan, I don't have so much a problem doing it over as long as you're bringing them up. It's the dumbing down I got the problem with.
Yeah.
Asking him regardless.
Yeah, I mean, my problem is that he needed to present a balanced budget and show that he has some leadership skills.
Yeah, that got it. I was going
He
to
really
I was
didn't
gonna-
graduate in the bottom quarter of his law class, which, from what I understand, he did.
Well, they cheated to get to the bottom.
Well, the other problem, if he presented a resume in any place in corporate America, he wouldn't be hired. I mean, you know,
No,
but
I don't know how he's done it, how he's conned the people of Delaware so long.
I don't know, you know, but
Dan, is it really conning when they have the information and choose to look the other way?
Well, it's sort of like, I mean, what Obama said about him, right? He said, give it to Biden and he'll screw it up. I mean, he even Obama,
He was a little more blunt.
Yeah, I mean, he said the
Is that what
truth
Obama
about the
said?
guy. He's
Biden
such
will
a
screw it up.
he's such a joke, and everybody knows. And plus, his mental problems and all that. What in the hell are we doing? You know, if Trump had a brain and any social skills, you know, but he doesn't, and so it's so damn. We're in a leadership crisis in our country because we can't.
I'm sorry, Dan, you talking about Trump or Biden?
Both.
Okay.
Yes.
We're in a leadership crisis in our country because we can't find and elect leaders that can actually lead. You know, I mean, it's like Romney sort of disqualified himself because he was such an idiot on how he handled the whole Trump situation, and so he even got disowned by his own party. He probably, I mean, I don't think he get elected for dog catcher anymore. Because he sided with the Democrats on impeachment, which
Well, isn't it? And he become a senator from Utah.
Yeah, he's an idiot.
Dan, why is there a disincentive for good people to go into politics?
Because it's such a mud wrestling match, right?
It's
Okay.
It's so dirty and so corrupt.
You can ask Steve. He's a professional politician. Why do people stay away from politics?
Well, but
Yeah.
there's
Steve's been basking in the light of the Washington D.C. lights. See, they get power hungry. They go there. They see the
I agree with
power
that.
and the wealth and all that, and the opportunities for corruption, and you know, the hookers and all the things that the lobbyists provide, and they lose themselves. They lose themselves.
I think, well, I'll tell you, part of the problem is.
Dan, does they lose themselves or does they expose themselves?
Well, let me give you a personal
Both.
perspective. Most people get into politics because initially, when you get in at the local or state level, but particularly the congressional level, you get in it, and then you eventually lose the reasons you were there because you get so immersed in the photo ops and the speeches and the VIP passes, and all of us, including myself, have been guilty of that. You eventually lose your purpose, and then the second component is the fundraising. So you get elected to Congress, and within 2 months of getting elected, you're already raising money for your next cycle. So you look at, so you just basically get yourself in this cycle where you're raising money, you're not focusing on the issues that you want to focus on. For me, the irony is I've never in my life been asked to run for higher offices now, but the reason is I actually like media more than politics. And so I'm the only government official in North Carolina right now that's actually touching millions of people around the world and country through Roku and through other media. And I like the media more as a pundit because I can reach more people without, but the irony is now that I don't want it as bad, I'm willing to throw it out the wayside. Everyone's like, no, Steve, run for this, run for this. So it's kind of funny, but I got to tell you, to me, it's been life-changing because the problem with politics is when you pull all the onions back, it's not a really rewarding profession. You really can't move the needle that much. And you have to you have so many meeting, right? So,
well, and you struck it right on the head. And the reason why most congressional offices are run by the staffs.
Yeah.
And they used to call it the Iron Triangle. Now it's called something different. I think Trump called it the deep state. But the whole idea is government is not ran by the politicians. It's run by the staffs. It's run by the hired guns in the different administrative levels.
Yeah, but who hires the staff? Don't the politicians hire their own staff?
Over time, they're hired. Now, it used to be that one party came in, you'd clean out, fire everybody, and hire new people and that kind of thing. That kind of stopped with the unionization of federal employees and all that kind of thing. And so it's a big corrupt party house, and that it's well out of control from the hands of the American people. It's the reason why we have a lot of national consensus on issues that need to be changed, and we can't get it changed because of the staffs and the interference. Trump ran into this big time. The reason why what happened to him is because his loudmouth, he ran into a buzzsaw with the intelligence agencies.
Dan,
And
you're
so
telling me
there
the
are-
elections are a facade?
No, they're not a facade. I mean, they are real and they happen, but we have no control over
The whole thing's a
state.
charade then. It's no longer we the people then if our politicians aren't the ones being the drivers.
To some extent, that's true. Because watch what Trump did. Because he went against the intelligence community, and then suddenly he had the FBI and the Secret Service and everybody on his ass with all these false narratives promoted by the Democrats.
They all need
And,
to be
I mean,
fired then. Are they going to become your president?
That's not new. That's not new. They were doing that with
Well,
FBI.
I
They were
know,
doing that with
but it's the
the
first
60s.
time
They were doing that in the 40s with
but
some
it's
of
the
the
first
gangsters
time
that they
it's
went
happened-
after with
it's-
the FBI.
Get rid of them all, Mark.
So
It's
I would
happened
say
with
that
the
this
sitting
is not a
president.
new
It's the
narrative.
first time, listen, it's the first time that we've had actual sedition that we know of by the deep state against the sitting president. Now, I don't like Trump, but it was outright sedition and lies. That's what I don't like about it, is the fact that it was unconstitutional and treasonous what happened. It was wrong from that standpoint. Now,
But
Trump
Dan,
kind of
And
Trump kind of
Nick,
called
wouldn't
it on
you
himself.
put to some degree? Yeah, but
Pardon?
Dan and Nick, would you to some degree put it at the same kind of flavor as Watergate and maybe also what went on with the Chicago
No,
7
it's
in the
different
60s?
than
I mean, that was like
Watergate
all of
because
7, but that was a
Nixon
very
did that to
deep
himself,
trial. It
right?
was like a circus trial.
Well,
Some
it
people
was
would say
like
that involved
Watergate in
Elder
reverse.
Stoover and the Black Panthers.
It was kind of like Watergate in reverse, in that Hillary Clinton was really behind the Russiagate thing. I mean, and we know all that, right? So it was Watergate, but it wasn't Trump. It was Clinton, and she and her people should have been prosecuted for that, and it never was. The FBI has never been accountable. Neither of the other security services ever been accountable. Clinton's people were still, they had a shadow CIA going in the background with Brennan and the others. I mean, it was amazing to see what was going on in our country because Brennan had this shadow security organization in the background. That's why they had to strip his security clearance, because he was acting beyond his capacity, no longer worked for the federal government. I mean, when you see the level of corruption, and I know you want to do the Eldridge and all that other crap, but I'm talking this has national significance. It just doesn't affect one person. If they can act in such a corrupt way, then none of us are really safe. None of us are really safe as Americans because our guaranteed constitutional rights are no longer there. Look at September 6th. There are 40,000 hours of narrative. We saw what the networks wanted us to see. And now we're going back and learning that there was far more stuff that shows a different narrative.
Hey, Dan and Lee, I got a quick question, because there are some people that would argue, and I'm going to go back in history, that this government influence is not new.
Yeah, the budget.
There are some
You're
people
right.
that would argue that even the 9/11 attack, there was a reason that the banks were attacked. and that there was a reason that.
Oh yeah, I heard
positions
about
were
that, and
and
I
it
heard that
might
there
have
was a
been,
theory.
manipulated and everything in that space. So, do you think that there is
But
any legitimacy to what they are
going
accusing and
back
saying
to
could
the
have possibly
going back to the budget, because that's what we need to talk about now. There is a legitimate concern about what the Biden administration is doing, because what they're doing is terribly irresponsible and terribly wrong-minded, because they're not interested in actually meeting their constitutional responsibility at all. They're just trying to move forward this stinking agenda that they couldn't even get through, when he knows that he just wanted to pick a fight. He's not being responsible. Now, with respect to some of the tax increases, maybe some of those are warranted, especially with respect to Medicaid. And there needs to be things done with Medicaid and Medicare. We know that has to be done. But a lot of the stuff is just the same old stuff he couldn't get through, and it's just ridiculous. It's irresponsible.
Well,
Nick?
The other thing about the budget, he claims that the deficits are going to go down. We've had the lowest deficit ever, et cetera, the lowest reduction in deficit ever and ever. Okay, but now you go pull, and this comes from actually the USCBO. You pull the numbers and go look at them. They actually increase to the largest it's ever been, to 1.8 trillion. So listen to this. In 2024, they expect to spend $1.8 trillion more than they take in. That is big enough to actually hire everybody in India. In other words, seriously, I mean, it's bigger than the budget of, bigger than the whole GDP of Canada. But can you imagine that? And he passes on it like, hey, we're decreasing the deficit. It's not. It's going.
Nick, maybe he's talking about the rate of increase is going down.
No, the rate of increase actually increases until he's out of office. Then it mysteriously goes down. Okay, this is like saying, hey, look, everything's going to be better 20 years from now. All right, but right now I'm just going to increase the budget. Now, if you look at it from a politician's standpoint, he spends more money.